Welcome to the programme. Tonight, the regional electorate that turned its back on the major parties. Also coming up, the hidden horrors of childcare centres. Adele Ferguson joins me to give an update on her investigation into failed regulation in the sector. And the salmon industry on alert in Tasmania after fish deaths and waste washed up on beaches. There's no election date yet, but independent Helen Haines and her army of volunteers are already knocking on doors in the Victorian electorate of Indi. Her assessment is it's the Liberals who could prevent her winning a third term. Former ABC stalwart Phil Williams has returned to 7:30 and will be hitting the campaign trail for us in the coming weeks. Tonight, he's off to Indi.
Here at this year's Tallangatta show, we have such wonderful exhibitors who do bring their stock out for the parade here year after year.
On the shores of Lake Hume, the bold and the beautiful are locked in fierce competition at the Tallangatta show.
I'd like you to guess who the noisiest pet was.
But there are political animals on exhibit here too, hoping to be crowned Indi's best in show come election day.
We need an 8% swing here. The Liberals need an 8% swing to win. So it does marry up nicely.
James Trenery is the Liberal candidate for Indi in Victoria, campaigning on issues like the housing crisis and cost of living.
Yeah, well, you're looking at sort of $15 to $1,700, that water increase. Electricity bill.
The seat was once held by Conservatives for more than 80 years, and he's trying hard to win it back.
It's time for change. Things aren't happening. Things aren't getting done that they'd like to see get done.
Since 2013, two independents have held Indi. First, Cathy McGowan, backed by the Voices for Indi community group. She defeated Liberal incumbent Sophie Mirabella, and now Helen Haines, who's held the seat since 2019 and is also backed by the Voices group.
Well, you need to take the notes on the phone, though, you mean?
Indi is the first federal seat to have one independent succeed another.
Hello. Hello. How are you? Helen Haines.
With no party head office to rely on, the old walk and Tallangatta talk is still how the campaign for a third term is run.
We're around door knocking, we're here for the show.
While she won last time with a 7% swing, this is a tough town for her. In this particular town, you lost by about 10 votes.
Yeah, so it could just be 10 conversations, right? Like, we just met some young blokes up the street and this will be their first time voting. So, you know, maybe just by meeting me today, they'll think, oh, there's someone I know, there's someone who gives a damn. All right, let's try these folks.
She's very community orientated, like very much. I've seen her around.
Is she going to get your vote?
Probably, yeah.
I don't think there's anybody home there.
She's far from alone. Her not-so-secret weapon is the Orange Army, the Voices for Indi volunteers, who've all signed up to a shared set of values.
We want it to be respectful, we want to listen to people, we want to hear other points of view, and we're not going to trash talk anybody. And this is Sally, part of my team.
How many have you got signed up?
We've got 600 people signed up already, and there's another 400 people on the database who we're working through.
600 volunteers?
Yeah.
Some of the major parties would kill for that.
Yeah, they would. Well, maybe they need to change their behaviour. And I think, you know, this is what spurred us on in Indi. If we wanted to change politics, we had to be the change.
It's not just Tallangatta's hearts and minds to be won. The seat of Indi stretches from the Murray River in the north right down closer to Melbourne. It includes regional cities like Wodonga, Wangaratta and Benalla, the forests and the farms, and all the issues in between. It's the busiest time of the year at Rob Hawkins' vineyard. Lots of workers and worry if things go wrong.
There's a single issue that stands out, and that is telecommunications. Where we're standing right now, if I want to make a phone call on a mobile phone, can't do it.
Can we have a look at your phone there?
Sure.
Let's see what's there.
So, if you can see bars, you're a better man than me.
Oh, yeah, okay, right.
And this is the best place on the property.
So further down the valley?
As you go down the valley, nothing. If someone was injured down in the vineyard, it potentially could cost lives. There has been work done, and that was clearly as a result of the advocacy of Cathy McGowan and Helen Haynes. There have been some projects put in place. They haven't fixed the problem yet.
But another issue, the rollout of renewables, is creating both power and tension.
Meanwhile, you've got this huge area.
We're at the corner of the proposed Meadow Creek solar farm and battery project. Over 500 hectares of solar panels, enough power, we're told, to light up over 100,000 homes. But not all the neighbours are impressed.
Location is key, and this really is not the right location. The water catchment, the fire risks, the biodiversity, which it is high.
You tried to sell your place, right?
Correct.
And no bites?
No bites, no luck at all.
Because of this?
If anyone local knows what's going on around here, they would stay away for sure.
Before this became a big issue, who would you have naturally voted for?
I've probably supported Helen, just because she's an independent from the main parties.
And now?
Well, that's what I don't know, because no one seems to be, standing out.
Unlike independents based in the city that have campaigned on climate change, Helen Haynes' seat is where the panels hit the paddocks.
What we're facing in rural and regional Australia is now the realisation, I think, that the vast majority of that energy generation is going to happen in rural and regional Australia.
There's a very large solar farm proposed at Meadow Creek locally. A lot of opposition. The people there want to know exactly what you think, whether you're for or against.
I don't think it's my role as a federal member to take a side on a private project on private land. But for me, it's about being fair, principled, and ensuring that communities can access the halls of power, can access people like the Environment Minister, and that's what I've been able to do for them.
Solar's good, and it's got to be there in the mix, but it's got to go in the right place, and I don't believe this is the right place.
Look at those wonderful patient Clydesdales.
Back at the Tallangata show, there's no waiting for a result. But the political show will have to wait for its grand parade.
Are you happy with the way independents have run this seat?
Yes. I think a lot of politicians nowadays, you just listen to them and you just personally, I don't like listening to them. I don't trust them. I feel like you can trust an independent.
Got a Liberal Party flyer in your pocket. Is that an indicator of the way you're going?
At the moment, I'm still assessing. I have great scepticism about independence. It might be, nice in theory, but by and large, they have very, very little political clout in the long run of things.
But the only way to beat Labor is to have Liberal in. So it's as simple as that. You can guarantee my vote. It's hard for an independent who's not in the cabinet, who's not in the team that's governing, to get these things done.
You may well be part of a very powerful group of independents deciding who governs Australia after this election. Have you decided which way you'll go?
I can work with whoever forms government. What I do know is that I will never sign a formal deal with any major party. For me, every single vote on every single piece of legislation is always a decision that I would make according to the needs of the people of Indi and good governance. I've always done that and I will continue to do that.
There can only be one winner, and no one wants to be the political bridesmaid, or worse still, a feather duster.
For anyone who's trusted their child to a childcare centre, the revelations in this week's Four Corners on the failed regulation of the multi-billion-dollar sector would have come as a horrible shock. The Prime Minister and Treasurer responded by saying the majority of centres care for children properly. But the gaps in the system are obvious, while the government is also proposing a large funding boost to establish universal access to childcare in Australia. Here's an excerpt from Monday night's story.
I can tell you that there were multiple reports of inappropriate sexual touching, multiple reports of educators treating children really roughly, lots of broken elbows, broken wrists, kids being kicked, a lot of kids being verbally abused, yelled at, and a lot of, unfortunately, inappropriate restraint, force feeding, forcing children to go to sleep, putting pillows over their heads. And this is just one tiny amount. This is just one little snapshot of what is going on in these centres.
Investigative reporter Adele Ferguson joins me now. Adele, that is a shocking litany of events. That's Abigail Boyd, a New South Wales politician. Where does she fit into your story?
Yeah, so she did a call for papers in November last year. And what that is, she wanted to go to the department and the regulator to find out just how many breaches and incidents and what they were like and how responsive the regulator was to them. And what happened since then is the government and the department has blocked her every step of the way. They let her look at them, but wouldn't let the public. It's all been made secret. And what she was talking about is just a smidgen of what's out there.
So what is she trying to achieve now?
What she's trying to achieve is to find out just what's going on in childcare, because there's such a cloud of secrecy over it. And so what I'm hearing is that there will be some light shed, that she may have the numbers to get a parliamentary inquiry. That's the speculation. And if she does, it will be imminent and it will allow the committee to call chief executives of some of these childcare centres to ask questions. They have the powers to compel, to talk to educators to see what's going on, and also to parents to give them a voice.
This is obviously the information that we need. Now, I referred in the intro there to the fact that both the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, responding to your report on Monday, said that the majority of centres are well run. Given what you're saying about the lack of knowledge, do we really know that?
We don't. I hope they are well run. The problem is they're relying on the national quality standards. And the problem with that is the Productivity Commission put out a report in September which said that on average, every 4 years, centres are being assessed. In some cases, it can be up to 9 years.
Hold on, you're saying they're only assessed once in 4 years?
Absolutely, and 10%, 1 in 10, have never been assessed at all.
Now, in that Productivity Commission report, they also asked for a commission to be established to oversee the standards, which, as you say, clearly from the numbers of visits, we don't really know exactly what's going on. So the government hasn't, as far as I know, the government hasn't responded to that request by the Productivity Commission. Is that the solution to what you've discovered, an overarching commission, do you think?
I think a commission is a good start. Also, there needs to be an independent review of these national quality standards. But they also have the power because the government pumps in $14 billion a year into childcare centres through subsidies. So they have that lever to say, if you're a centre and you're not meeting quality standards, we're going to turn it off. And let's see how quick they improve their game.
So as things stand at the moment, you're saying there's a limit to the regularity of the investigations. When there are visits made to childcare centres, how thorough are they?
They are thorough, but the problem is the centres are given notice. So some of them, you know, if you're a big centre, you'll have compliance managers who can train the educators what to say. They'll run out and buy a new toy, so it'll all look great. So some of the educators we've spoken to say it's totally gamed.
So as things stand at the moment, again, in the response that you had from your story, the government is saying this is essentially a state issue. Obviously, the federal government's putting a lot of money in, but do the state governments around the country have the capacity to do much better, more thorough inspections, more frequent inspections?
I think what has to happen, because the state governments also pump in billions in grants, what they need to do is start diverting some of that money to regulation, because the regulation in all states is not fit for purpose.
If you're trying to decide on a childcare centre in your area and you look at a report, how do you know whether or not the judgment of inspectors is something that you can rely on?
It's not so much the judgment, it's the frequency in which they go. And what we know is on average they're going every 4 years. So one of the problems with the sector is there's a lot of buying and selling of properties, so owners are changing quite frequently. So if you have a centre that hasn't been rated for 4 or 5 years, it might have gone through 2 or 3 pairs of hands.
So if you're a parent watching this or a grandparent watching this, where can they go to get reliable data on a childcare centre in their area? Is there anywhere they can go?
Well, that is the reliable place they go to look at what the quality rating is of the childcare centre, and it's often out of date. So they have to look at what does the childcare centre look like and just ask questions. How often do the staff change hands? How long have some of these staff been there?
All right, so go in and ask proper searching questions of any centre you're considering.
Absolutely.
Adele Ferguson, thanks for coming in, and we'll hear from you what happens with the inquiry.
Thank you.
Thank you. The salmon industry trades on Tasmania's clean green image, but it's facing new controversy over a large fish kill. Investigations are underway into how congealed oil from dead fish has washed up on public beaches. Ellen Coulter reports.
We were starting to hear reports that there was some sort of event happening out on the waterways.
Alistair Allen is heading south on Tasmania's Huon River. A campaigner with the Bob Brown Foundation and a Greens federal election candidate, he and other activists have been gathering drone footage of southeastern salmon farms over the past month.
We've been out only once here on the drone, but we've also been flying over this area from different vantage points on land as well.
The Bob Brown Foundation footage shows dead salmon floating in their pens and masses of the dead fish being dumped into skips. The fish belong to 2 of the state's 3 salmon producers, Huon Aquaculture and Tassal, who've complained to authorities about how the footage was obtained.
When we first got the drone footage of these rotting, bloated, skin falling off fish, it was we knew that something absolutely catastrophic was happening on the waterways. This industry is known for mortalities every summer, but this was something different.
Since mid-February, southern Tasmanian residents have also been reporting strange fishy lumps littering their beaches, along with chunks of fish carcasses. The extent of the situation has now become clearer.
So effectively what the companies are dealing with is a large-scale relatively large-scale mass mortality event. The fish are getting sick.
Speaking for Huon, I can only say that it has been a completely unprecedented level of mortality and unprecedented in the truest sense of the word. We've never had this rate of mortality, and we've certainly not experienced it in such a short period of time.
At least 5,500 tonnes of salmon was dumped at waste facilities last month, killed by a strain of bacterial disease they hadn't been vaccinated against. The mass mortality event has hit Huon Aquaculture and Tassal's farms in the D'Entrecasteaux Channel. Luke Martin is with Salmon Tasmania, which represents the companies.
It's in the order of about 10% of the overall fish growing across the state. So whilst it's being perceived as a major event, the reality is it's got to be relative to the scale of the industry.
Those clumps on the beaches washed up from nearby salmon pens.
So we have seen fish that have decayed to a level that oils have been released from those fish. It's not harmful to pets, it's not harmful to people, but we do understand completely that it is distressing, which is why ourselves and others in the industry have taken steps to clean up this material.
Huon Aquaculture took us out to some of its affected pens late last week.
Obviously we can see today that things are looking quite different. The pens are clean, we're coming down off the peak of that mortality event.
For almost 2 weeks in February, Huon gave its fish here antibiotics to help bring the outbreak under control, and they've been clearing out dead fish.
It's a bit like an automated mortality extraction system, and then we pump them over onto a boat into what we call mortality bins, and then we take them to shore.
But the environmental regulator isn't sure the clean-up by the salmon companies has been fast enough. Earlier this month, the EPA issued Huon and Tassal with directions to remove fish carcasses and waste from their pens, saying the continued presence of fish products on the beach indicated the company's responses to the mortality event had not been sufficient. It's still investigating potential breaches of environmental licences, waste regulations and the Environmental Management Act.
I think we're very aware of the situation in terms of what the impact has been on the community. In terms of what that looks like from a legal standpoint, there is a process to go through and we are participating in it fully.
But questions have also been raised about Huon's handling of fish at these pens. Footage taken here 2 weeks ago appears to show workers sealing live salmon into massive bins with dead fish.
When they die, they're meant to die quickly, and this was not what we saw. We saw fish being left to thrash around, to flop around and to suffocate to death, and that was shocking.
Watching that footage was extremely distressing. It's not at all reflective of the high standards of operation that we have in place across Huon.
Huon is the only salmon company with RSPCA certification, indicating its fish are raised in a low-stress and well-managed environment. The RSPCA has suspended that certification while it looks into the video, and Biosecurity Tasmania has also commenced an animal welfare investigation. The environmental contamination and alleged animal cruelty has outraged many local residents and those already opposed to the industry's practices.
Eating salmon is killing Tasmania!
A week after the video showing alleged animal welfare issues made headlines, one of the ministers responsible for the salmon industry hadn't seen it.
It's been pretty prominent across the media and it's an industry that falls under your watch. Why haven't you had a look at it?
Oh, well, look, there are competing demands on one's time, but having been told about it is, as far as I'm concerned, sufficient for me.
What is the government going to do to try and make sure that we don't get another mass mortality event like this, or if we do, that it is dealt with quickly and transparently?
That is where we as a government always rely on the science and not on a simplistic, cheap political stunt as others have tried. We will listen to the science, we will listen to the Chief Veterinary Officer, we will listen to IMAS and other institutions that are able to guide us scientifically, the Chief Veterinary Officer, to ensure that this incident, to the very best of our practices, can be avoided in the future.
With a federal election looming, salmon may well be front of mind for Tasmanian voters and candidates.
10 years ago, I was a big supporter. I was a big eater of salmon. Coming from Tasmania, I won't touch it with a bar stick today. I just will not.
Senator Jackie Lambie is largely concerned about the state of Macquarie Harbour on the west coast.
You can do whatever fish farming you want, but you get it out there on the deep sea. Not on our coastal lines, on our coastal shores, and not in our harbours. Enough's enough.
The Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, is currently reviewing the approvals that allowed salmon farming to expand in the harbour in 2012. But both Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton have given guarantees to the industry that salmon farming will continue there.
There are a lot of Tasmanians who know how important this industry is to their community. A lot of people who work in this industry who care deeply about the environment themselves and wouldn't work in it if they didn't see that it was sustainable within the Tasmanian environment.
It is enough. It has got to stop, because once we lose that label of being clean green, it doesn't just affect our fish. It affects our agriculture and all the rest of Tasmania, and we are finished.
The potential for a ceasefire in Ukraine and the breaking of one in Gaza are dominating the news. But another war and possible ceasefire have been left out of the spotlight in the mineral-rich Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa. US President Donald Trump may back a deal to end the fighting, but there will be a price to pay. Norman Hamont reports.
In the heart of Africa, the latest chapter in a seemingly endless war. Rebels in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, fighting for more than a decade, have captured more of some of the richest land on Earth. Yinka Adegoke, Africa editor of the Semaphore website, says what started as an ethnic political conflict has the rebels eyeing a huge resource prize.
There's an economic reason why they're in this region. This is a region that is very rich in many of the world's rare earths and very valuable minerals.
The rebel group known as M23 originated in the Congo. They are predominantly Tutsi, the same ethnic group that dominates the government in Rwanda. There have long been allegations that country provides them vital support.
Research by the United Nations and the United States separately have very much pointed the finger at Rwanda as the financier of these rebels.
The Congo's government says more than 8,000 people died when M23 captured two major cities, Goma and Bukavu. Nearly 80,000 refugees have spilled over the DRC's borders, seeking safety. Stephanie Wolters is with the South African Institute of International Affairs.
M23's military capability really is Rwanda's military capability. I mean, without the Rwandan Defense Force support to the M23, that movement would not have been able to achieve even a fraction of what it has achieved.
From an outsider's perspective, the success of M23 seems unlikely. Their alleged backer, Rwanda, is a fraction of the DRC's size and population. But the territory the rebels now control is almost as big as Rwanda itself. Lucrative mines are dotted all over this area. It's some of the most resource-rich land in the world.
When you think about the East in particular, yes, it's very rich in coltan, which we find in our smartphones. It's very rich in cobalt, which is just really valuable to the future of electric vehicles and all the rest of it in the batteries. So there's no doubt this is a very rich region.
As the DRC faces the loss of more territory, more rare earths and minerals could fall into M23's hands.
When they go in, they don't just go in and attack, they actually build a whole, sort of almost governmental system where they take over towns or villages and they tax locals and they take control of the mines and basically siphon them out of the region and export them via Rwanda.
The leaders of the DRC and Rwanda have called for a ceasefire after talks in Kara, but it's unclear if rebels will agree. The Congo has also reached out to Washington. The father-in-law of Donald Trump's daughter, Tiffany, Massad Boulos, a senior presidential advisor, has been mentioned as a potential peace envoy.
But the big part of that is also they have an eye on the minerals, because the thing about Donald Trump's this administration in Africa is they are quite clear that they want a more transactional relationship. And that kind of transactional relationship, as you saw with the kind of Ukraine discussions, is, okay, we'll help you out here. What's in it for us?
Adegoke says the U.S. is competing with China, which dominates mining in the DRC, controlling 80% of cobalt extraction. Rwandan President Paul Kagame will be key to any deal. Labeled a dictator by critics, he's said he sympathizes with fellow Tutsis fighting in the Congo. He's viewed as a strong influence on M23, but he has always denied any official connection.
They can't tell anybody and convince anybody that the actual people who are fighting now, who started this fighting we're talking about, came from Rwanda. They did not come from Rwanda.
In the recent offensive, large numbers of DRC troops surrendered. Others have been accused of desertion. The DRC has long been accused of neglecting its army.
You have to remember or imagine that you have Congolese soldiers who are being paid $100 a month to go and put their lives on the line for a country that doesn't respect them enough to provide them with even basic training or basic equipment.
Dozens of countries take part in peacekeeping in the Congo, including South Africa. 14 of its soldiers died in the recent fighting.
As a nation, we are indeed proud of our very brave fallen soldiers.
A regional peacekeeping force, including South Africa, will now be withdrawn. Stephanie Walters says President Cyril Ramaphosa has been under mounting pressure over the deployment.
And Ramaphosa hasn't really provided a very convincing answer as to why South African lives are being put on the line and why South African money is being spent.
With the regional multinational force opposing rebels disbanding, there is one less barrier to M23 capturing more territory and more valuable mines. Tens of billions of dollars are at stake. And once again, the Congo's vast mineral wealth appears to be not a blessing, but a curse.
And that's the programme for this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your company. See you tomorrow. Good night.